that is the challenge of being a leader, right? If you want to build a successful company that is not going to be like a lifestyle brand or something that's just going to, get you by, year over year, month over month, what have you, you have to get buy-in from the team that you are ultimately building, the people you're working with, and the customers that you support, or the products that you support, whatever it may be, right? And that's the challenge. Like that's where like, oh, drinking the Kool-Aid, the whole thing, like, good leaders not only provide like motivation, but they provide realness into insight of what the business is doing, how they're performing, and where like you ultimately, where teams or individuals need to um either improve or be motivated, right? I wouldn't even say improve, which is like, how can we get you motivated? If you're not doing well in this, what do you care about?
TJ, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm
What up?
fired up to be here. Fired up.
Yeah,
Here we go.
we're
Long time
super
coming.
stoked to have you. It's good. So, what tip do you have for navigating difficult conversations? Since we're all about compassionate conversation, that's our jam. That's what we're here for. Let's start the show talking about it. Your answer was ask why. Like, where does that? And you came at it quick. What's your approach to asking why? We'll start there.
Yeah, so it kind of stems from my history, and where I used to handle difficult conversations, and it would be more opinionated on my end, where it would just be a back and forth, not such so a discussion, but more of like a debate. And I used to get either frustrated, or I think it would be funny when somebody would have a difficult conversation that I didn't agree with, and instead I had this thought. I don't know what really triggered it. I'm sure I had a lot of things going on in my life at the time, but I just started asking why someone believes in that, right? And even if I didn't disagree with it, if I started asking why, what I noticed is if I kept, it's kind of the same thing. Like when you have Rodney, you have kids, and I'm sure there's a point where like, you know, you know, why is the sun, rise in the morning? Why, you just go down that path of why, and then they get curious. And it's the same thing if you have these types of discussions, at least in my experience, is like, if I just ask somebody why, then they start explaining their thoughts, and I keep on asking why, then they keep going, and they'll naturally in conversation get to a point where like, okay, now we're on the same page of why you believe in what you believe, and I understand where they're coming from, versus just making an assumption or like starting a debate and having it lead to like a negative place. If that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. Tone of how do you strike a tone that's accepted? Something I struggle with is I'm super curious, but oftentimes I can be very intense when I ask questions, and it can come off as like an inquisition. And so I'm trying to figure out how to soften a little bit.
Yeah, I think part of it is just, I think my tone naturally comes from a spot of like, my voice is semi deep, and it comes from a spot of just like
It's very
curiosity
soothing and relaxing, and I'm gonna fall
Great
You got
asleep
that.
radio
You
now.
got that. You got that late night DJ thing going,
I've definitely
which is
gotten that
scientifically
before.
proven to calm people.
Yeah, so I think it's part of that where like I've always been good at like when I allow myself to, and I take the time to like want to learn somebody's thoughts and feelings, and I ask why, people tend to open up, which is, I think, I think I'm lucky to have had that, and people don't feel like nervous or closed off around me. If anything, they open up. So but I do it from like a genuine curiosity standpoint. My biggest pet peeve is anybody who's disingenuous, and I tend to be able to seek that out quite well. Um, and so if I feel like if I'm coming from a side of curiosity and someone who actually wants to learn where they're coming from, whether I agree with it or not, um, it tends to lead to a positive conversation, and it leads to a healthy discussion versus like a debate. And don't get me wrong, I've been in situations where with family members, whether it's politics related, whether it's like sports related, whether it's whatever related, like where there are certain family members who can get under my skin more so than others, and maybe I pop off every once in a while, but I try to learn from it and recognize it and make sure like this person isn't going to change. If that way, the only thing that's going to change is my attitude and my thought process within a discussion. So if I can frame that differently, I think it would be more healthy for everybody.
Comment and then a question. I think there's an interesting space of sincerity and being genuine that 80%, 90% of all communication is nonverbal, right? It's not just body language, it's not just tone, it's the things that are so imperceptible that you have to train yourself to see that you see regardless because of evolution at the end of the day. And when someone asks why in an insincere way, you get defensive. When someone asks why with curiosity as an anchor point, it's amazing. Just it's like, oh, why do you think that? Like, and it can really be all as long as it's sincere, regardless of tone. Sometimes it can be pretty eye popping. How effective that simple word can be. But you
I
said
know you
when
have a
people
question, Keith.
yeah,
I know you have
yeah,
a question, but you just brought up
yeah,
something that I wrote down. So I kind of want the sincerity and the disingenuous thing real
yeah.
quick.
Let's go. Yeah.
Just, I mean, I think in general, people's bullshit meters are pretty good, but from my own personal experience, I'm not always tuned into it or like willing to listen to it or willing to see like what I actually pick up. Um, but like you said, you're really good at it. Any thoughts as to why you're good at it or how you go about sensing people's authenticity?
I had a feeling you were going to ask that question, and I really don't. It's kind of just like a radar that I have, and the proof is sort of in the pudding with people that I surround myself with. And situations where like actually this person is rubbing me the wrong way, I don't really get a good vibe from them, and then hearing maybe like a year, 6 months later, like something happened with that person or a situation they were in, I'm like, okay, well, that's not somebody I necessarily want to associate myself with. And I can kind of just read through that. Maybe it's because, yeah, I don't know, it's just something that, but the thing with that too, and I try to be conscious of this, is like when you have a bullshit meter that's like all the way to the red, and you're like, okay, bullshit, 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 it's like that doesn't, you don't want to necessarily like define that person, or you want to like exclude that person from your life, because then you like, I have this I'm predisposed to think that person is always going to be like that and they can't change, and I can't build a relationship with that person. So there is that bit of like give and take of, okay, this person is trying to either impress me, or this person is maybe is a bit lonely, or maybe there's something going on that maybe I can tap into and build a relationship with. And part of that is just like, running StudioPod, and you get a lot of different clients, and you have people from all walks of life. And so you need to make some sort of connection with them. And it's something that I try to be conscious of, but I still tend to trust my gut in those situations.
It speaks to I can tell if I like someone within 5 minutes, right? It's like, yeah, maybe, but give it a little bit of time to see what that. I mean, you don't have to be best friends with everybody you meet, but you can certainly build a connection. To your point, how do you maintain curiosity in other people? Is it a natural thing, or it sounds like it's something that you've trained yourself to do?
Yeah, I wouldn't, I think I wasn't always like that, I had just a very small bubble for a very long time. Like I knew who my really good friends were, I knew who my family was, and I didn't tend to like, I, I'm definitely extroverted, but I think there is an aspect of like introvertedness in there, and being comfortable
Mhm.
within my bubble and my home and my domicile, however it is that you want to pronounce that. Um, and
Yes.
I think just like stepping outside of that, like, so I went through So in 2018, I ended a relationship with somebody where I was with them for 8 years. I was married for a year and a half, and we divorced and separated in 2018. And I moved back to San Francisco from New York. And what had happened was, from the time that I left San Francisco to go to New York and the 4 years to come back, my bubble had since gone, meaning everyone had moved on with their lives, meaning they moved out of San Francisco. They moved, into the burbs, had kids, had dogs, they were moving forward. And what was my, my crew, if you will, or the people that I hung out with religiously, were gone. And so it kind of forced me to realize, okay, it's time to make new relationships and make new friends, and be curious to do so. And I always knew I was good at, like, meeting new people. I just never allowed myself to get to that point. And so coming back in a situation where, like, all right, well, I got to make new friends, was life changing, because it allowed me to build these types of relationships, have new groups of close friends while still maintaining those other groups. And it's very rewarding. And I do like going to meet someone new for a beer or for coffee or for whatever it may be. Even if I get a little sense of anxiety of, like, all right, I don't want to do this, but, like, when I go do it, I feel fulfilled, even if it's, like, not a fruitful relationship, whether that could be like a personal, professional side of things. So coming out and coming back to that situation, and being forced to do it, it's kind of like that fight or flight situation. And for me, it's always been like, fight. It's okay to take chances on yourself and realize what you're good at. And being curious is definitely one of those things.
So it's always this. Thank you for indulging the conversation portion of this conversation. The taking a chance on yourself. So I want to take a pivot regarding your journey to entrepreneurship. What were the specifics of that journey?
Yeah, it's just like well, first of all, it starts with, like, self-doubt and self-confidence, right? Didn't have a lot of it, necessarily, like, growing up. And I kind of was taught that, you find a good job, you make decent money, you find a partner, you raise a family, and you just, move forward. You do that. And I knew deep down, like, deep down, that, like, I was not meant to be in front of a screen working for somebody else for 9 to 10 hours a day. Right? That's just not what I was meant to do. It just took me years to figure that out. So my journey, was a huge sports fan growing up, massive sports fan. I used it as an escape. I used it for energy. I used it for, stress release. It was just, like, a huge part of my life. Like, it revolved it. I remember just, like, didn't matter what the sport was. I just loved watching anything that was, on the TV at the time. I used to analyze it. And so naturally, I went to school, for sport management at Washington State. Go Cougs. But they were the only program west of the Mississippi that had a sport management program, which essentially is just like a business degree with a sports focus. And so I really wanted to be an NBA scout, right? I love the idea of, um, evaluating players, helping building a team. And I was very close to getting in the footsteps of that, where you have to start as a video coordinator, because I didn't play in college, because I wasn't a manager in college. I kind of I had great connections. I just wasn't able to make that jump or get that position fulfilled. And so because of that, I took a job at a D2 school here in the Bay Area, being an assistant coach, an unpaid assistant coach, when I was living at home. When it's, like, right out of school. And at the end of the day, my
Do they
mom
still call that a job if it's not paid?
I don't know. I mean, now it's different, right? Like, yeah, it's very, very timely, right?
Yeah.
And so I wasn't making any money. My parents were just like, they supported me, which was great, through college to a point. And then afterwards, like, they were like, no, you're paying everything now. Like, you're going to pay everything, phone bill, car, everything. Like, you're an adult, time to buckle up. And so, couldn't do that unpaid coaching job anymore. So I got a position to pay the bills here in being in Silicon Valley, like in tech. And I worked for I was the sixth person at a startup, and just fell in love with it. So I had to take a job I took a job a startup, and kind of just fell in love with like being a startup and building this team, and it was very like different from any sort of position I ever thought being in an office would be like. And then I did, and then I took another job in sales because it was like I got more money and kind of progressed my career. Um, did some professional studies courses at NYU to learn some coding, because in tech, the more you know how to code, the more money you get paid. But at the end of the day, like speaking, this brings it back to being disingenuous. Um, the idea of like selling something on a screen, like SaaS technology, so software as a service, was just, and I literally just had this conversation with my mom the other day. Because she said, "Oh, you're good at sales. Like, that really helped you out." I'm like, "Yes, like technique wise, but I'm genuine now with what I do because I give a shit. Like, I truly 100% give a shit of what I'm doing. I believe in StudioPod. I believe in Julian, my co-founder. I believe in what we're doing." Whereas when I was working at Salesforce and another company before that called Percolate, like, while I was okay at my job, I was never 100% belief in what I was doing, because at the end of the day, in my position, I knew exactly the flaws of the business. I knew the flaws of the software. I knew the flaws of the technology, but I had to avoid that in conversations to try and get the sale. And that bothered the fuck out of me. It bothered me to my core. I could not excel. It was always in the back of my mind whenever I'd have these conversations. You learn these things about called reversing. So if anyone's out there and they're, evaluating technology or anything, and you ask a question and someone asks you a question back, it's because they're avoiding the question and they want to get to a deeper reason of why you want something. And it's a great technique, and it works really well. Um, going back to the question of why earlier,
Well,
like
there's a psychology of
yeah,
positioning there too, right? Like who comes first?
yeah. And so it just bothered the hell out of me. It just bothered I just couldn't give it my 100%. And so while I, was working at, Salesforce, at the end of the day, I was just like, I know this is what I'm not meant to do. But I wanted a little bit of stability financial wise. And you know, you know, sold my soul, if you will, for a bit there. And then eventually it just got to a head where I'm like, I'm doing this side hustle. I'm creating this podcasting studio. I'm, creating something that I really, really give a shit about. And finally, I just like made the jump. And, you guys talked about what book I would recommend earlier, when we were doing the rapid fire. When to Jump by Mike Lewis, like, was a pivotal read for me, at a very interesting stage in my life. And that kind of just planted the seed of like, I need to do my own thing. And finally made the jump. And it was the moment I left, the moment, day one of doing it, and starting StudioPod and being full time, I can't describe what I was going through. It was just like, holy shit, I know what I'm doing, and I get like this is what I was meant to do. It was freeing, it was rewarding, and I felt it all within that first day. There was no regret, no remorse, no what am I doing? It was full belief in myself and Julian and what we're doing, as a company, what I'm doing personally.
How did you? Oh, I guess I won't assume. Was there fear along with that?
No fear.
Really?
The only fear that I had was that I felt like I didn't. Well, I don't know if it was fear. It was being disingenuous, because I felt like I was disingenuous at what I was doing at my prior job, and there was fear that someone would be able to catch that I wasn't being genuine, I guess.
So
Like,
that pain of not being yourself was greater than any fear that might have it, if there was any, you didn't feel it because it was greater that to not be yourself. Would that
mhm.
be accurate?
Yeah, yeah. I remember I was, I was put on like a performance plan at Salesforce at the end there, and I remember like, and they're like, we need you to do this, you need to do that, all this. And I was doing it. I was putting my heart in it because, I didn't want to leave too early. I read all these different articles or books or situations of when people jump to do their side hustle full time. Like, you want to be in a good spot financially, like all this stuff. And I guess if there was any fear, it was just like, am I doing this too soon? And I remember having a conversation with my manager at the time, and I damn near broke down. I was like, I'm giving you everything I got here, and it's not good enough. I was like, let's just call it what it is. Like, let's agree to separate at this point. Let's just do it. And we did, and it was awesome, and it was a very healthy conversation. Uh, and it worked out for the best. And I think sometimes you need those situations of like a realization, because I could have done very well and they would have been like, all right, let's keep you on. And then 6 months later, like I then leave to do StudioPod. And at the end of the day, it would have hurt the business, right? It actually was a very, very good thing that had happened at that particular time.
How long were you running StudioPod as a side hustle before you left?
Yeah, I was doing it for about a little over a year.
Do you? So I like that question. I also think that what I do when I try and break down situations like this is like the procedural. And I think whether it was a year or 10 years doesn't necessarily matter so much as what were like that conversation you almost broke down. So like there were indicators along the way. And earlier when you were leading up to this, you said um that, and you said it a couple times actually, that you knew deep down that you weren't supposed to be in front of a screen working for somebody. Um how did you, so you knew it was there, and was it just like a not listening to it, like, and were there just little incidents like that, like, hey, you need to do this, and these like things that were just off that gave you indicators, like what, it's probably hard to explain, it's hard to ask,
No.
but
I
like,
know. I know where you're coming from, and ultimately, it just came from like I have a pretty strong inner critic. Excuse me. Something I constantly deal with all the time, and whether it's imposter syndrome or can't do this, can't do that. Like I'm very hard on myself. Um, and it's funny. I remember the moment I realized when I was in college. Oh, I knew exactly where I was walking. I could take you to the point when I learned that entrepreneurship was a major that you could do. And I realized like my senior year, and I was like, fuck, why didn't I do this? This is a thing. This
Yeah.
is exactly like, 'cause even as a kid, like I would always think about random ideas and like,
Yeah.
this would be really cool to invent this. It'd be really cool to do that. Like I always had that spirit, but I never had like the push of like, yes, you could go do that. And my parents were never like that, even though my stepdad's an entrepreneur.
Hmm.
Like he started like, well, I guess his grandfather started their own upholstery business, which now he runs. And but it wasn't more like that. It was like, get a job, find a career that you're good
Mm-hmm.
at, not that you love. Make money, support a family, rinse and repeat. But I knew like when I took that job initially with that 6-person startup, like, yes, it was fun, it was different, it was new, it was fresh, and I like change. It was not like, it wasn't like no job I had was ever 100% fulfilling, I guess. And to me, like I am in this big mode of being like, I never want to be I never want to be content. I want to be happy. And in many situations in my life, I've been content and not happy. And when I get to that point, it's time to make a change. It's time to reevaluate.
How do you, so when you assess that space of 100% fulfilled, what is that? What about doing what you do now brings that to you?
Well, a couple indicators. I wake up and I'm ready to fucking conquer the day. But like this morning, there was a problem with a show that we had, and I had to wake up at 2, 3 in the morning to rectify it. Right, no one else could at the time, and I had no like. Yes, it sucks waking up at 3 a.m., but it wasn't like fuck, whatever. Like, don't want to do it. It's like no, this is what you got to do, and I'm fulfilled by doing that. I'm fulfilled by helping other people create their shows. I'm fulfilled by individuals and brands who want to create something creative, and so I I don't I wake up and I'm like, I am excited to do what I'm doing. I'm excited at the opportunity. I'm excited at challenges. Whereas before, if I had a challenge, I would be like, oh, what, like, how can I cut this corner? Right? Like, I'm
It's
never the
like
person. Go ahead.
it's like the mundane or the, I guess, urgent. You're getting pleasure out of it. Like you're still like, yeah, I got this. Like, cool. Like it's not a thing because that's how you're attached to it. But back in the other world, that would have been like, oh God,
Yeah,
like
exactly. At the end of
I
the
gotta
day,
do.
everything that I'm doing has a direct correlation to how we and myself succeed. Like, not as a business, but from a personal value standpoint. Like, it is everything that I make, every decision that we make is going to affect us directly. Whereas before, I could be busting my ass on a project or a sale or whatever it may be, and I'm just like another cog in the system, right? Like, you're working for a 60,000 person company, you have people drinking the Kool-Aid, you have all these benefits, all this good shit. But at the end of the day, like, I could blow out the number, but it's still team related. And so there wasn't like a lot of incentive there for me. And then at the same point, I'm just like I said, it's just felt disingenuous.
So I think this is good trait. How much of it, and I think this is where we get often caught into the conversation about what we do versus like how we do it or how we live. How much of that fulfillment comes from the studio pod product versus it's yours and like that, right? Like it's yours and everything you do affects everything about it, positive and negative, and you get that full entire ownership and you get to wake up and be that person.
Well, it's a little bit of both, right? Like, I feel like the ownership is the product. People want to work with Julian and I because they can see that there is no bullshit. Like, there is no bullshittery. That's what we try to convey when we work with a new client, but also just like when Julie and I are on a call with anybody, it could be, a personal relationship, a partnership, potential new client, existing client. Our feedback is you guys just vibe off each other. Like, you guys are wholeheartedly giving us what you intend to do and what you're good at and what you're not good at. And I think that's refreshing for a lot of people. And so I hope that answers your question, but that's kind of like where
No, it hit me like a ton of bricks right when you were saying it. There is this, it ties right back into that. It's genuine, right? In my space, I get to be me. One of the, and I feel that with our consulting business and everything that we do, and Rodney and I are great at, like the things that we just know we feel connected to and we're awesome at. And I get to do that. Like, even if the product were just a little bit different, at the end of the day, like that behavior, that attachment, that alignment to just be me is what just brings that energy. And so I know that when something happens at 3 a.m, my response isn't an obligation of the hierarchy. And some people love that. And I'm not judging it, but I also, like, for me, feel the exact same. My obligation is to do the job I want to do. And I'm going to bring my best because that's what I want. And thus 2, 3 in the morning isn't as big of a deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Or
it's
at
just
least that's what I'm hearing from you. Yeah.
yeah, it's just like I just feel like I'm always myself, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's a great point. Like, I just feel like I am 100% TJ, and my weird quirkiness and the way I do things can be a little ass backwards, and I understand that. And maybe it's a little OCD-ish at time. I don't have OCD, but maybe there is some little qualities there, and like, it's okay. I'm getting shit done that I want to get done, and I will be open to criticism if I need to do something better. But at the end of the day, it is it emanates through both myself and Julian, and that's why we're both
Mhm.
fulfilled doing this, and we're both excited at the challenges. And like, waking up at when I accidentally wake Julian up at 2 a.m. because I add him on a calendar invite that I shouldn't have, and he's he's like, hey, can we not do that ever again? Like, I don't I guess I kill myself because I want to respect his time, but like,
Yeah.
I it's learning, and I'm still doing the stuff that I I love to do, and I am not. I wear my heart on my sleeve. I have a shitload of emotions. I always have, um, and I don't do well with just like not being myself, right?
It's
And yeah,
on that you sparked something like it's not about being an entrepreneur or being a cog in somebody's wheel house. It is about being yourself.
mhm.
What allows you to be yourself? If that's being an exec at a tech firm or it's working at McDonald's, like if that allows you to be yourself, everybody else can piss off.
Oh man,
And
that's a deep question.
it's like my daughter, she'll wear a princess dress. I'm like, oh, are you Moana or are you Elsa? And 9 times out of 10, he's like, no, I'm Ruby.
Yeah,
And I'm
100%.
like,
Yeah,
it's the best answer I could
yeah,
have ever heard.
best answer. Yeah.
That is the best answer. I think everyone has a different path to figuring out what is, being yourself. What does that mean, right? Um, I don't like. I think I said it earlier. Like for a long time, I dealt with a bit of self confidence issue. Like I just did not like growing up. I was very conscious of like used to have like flaming orange hair, flaming like bright orange hair as a kid, and I got teased about it as a lot. I got teased about it a lot, and it caused me to like really stunt my relationships with with women in that case, and dating and things like that. And I was like, oh, why would anyone ever want to date me? Why would anybody want to be involved like with a ginger, right? Like that was what I had to deal with, which is crazy now thinking about it. It's crazy now thinking about it. And then again, like when I got out of the separation, or when the separation happened or occurred, I got back. I'm like, well, what am I gonna do? I've been with someone for since I was 22. What the fuck am I gonna do here? Like, how am I gonna meet somebody? Like, this is weird. Like, I have this whole like stigma, this of being married, and it took like a couple of close friends and family members to pull me aside and like, dude, I remember this distinctly. Like, dude, you're tall, you take care of yourself, and I hate to say it, and you're funny. You'll be okay. You're gonna be just fucking fine. And like it took like getting pumped up to just like really believe in, you know, who I am and what I'm doing, and see the success of, people that want to do podcasting and people that are interested in just what I'm doing in life, even if it's from a professional standpoint and not a personal standpoint. And so the whole point of this anecdote is just like everyone gets there a little bit differently, right? And reading stories and learning from, like TED Talks or How I Built This, like those things fire me up and they motivate me because everybody comes from somewhere. And finding yourself is a massive challenge, right? And there's still a lot of people who don't figure that out until they're like well in the later years of their life. But once you do that, you get to that fulfillment stage that we talked about earlier. At least that's what I believe.
I think everybody's track is different. I think that one commonality, you called this out earlier, TJ. You said, the proof is in the pudding of the people that are around you, and like the quality of people around you, and it kind of is a mirror reflecting back. And I think a commonality in that road to finding oneself is having people around you that believe in you. Like if you don't have somebody around you that believes in you more than you believe in you from time to time, because like sometimes you should think you're the shit because you are. But those times when you don't, somebody that can pull you, smack you around in a loving way and pull you out of it, then you got to reevaluate who you got around you. And I think that's a commonality for those who, yeah.
So you got teased a lot, which certainly impacted your confidence, self-worth, self-evaluation, which you found your way out of. However, as a kid, you spent a lot of time between San Francisco and Detroit. Why? And how hard did it make, or how much harder did it make it to have that confidence in self-worth and value?
Yeah. So just to give you a little bit of like family history, so I was born here in the Bay Area, but my mom is from upstate New York. My dad was from the Detroit area. And so when I was 2 and my sister was 1, my mom, my dad moved out of the Bay Area where they met to go to just outside of Detroit, where my dad is from and where our family is. And then my dad passed away of liver cancer when I was 7. And so my mom, was going through some stuff, family. My dad was the youngest, and he was well loved by everybody, and it caught everybody by shock. He died when he was 35. And so my mom picked us up and moved back to the Bay Area. And that's where she met my stepdad, or she knew my stepdad, and they hit it off, got married, and had my brother when I was 10. And that's where that's kind of where the love of sports came in. That's kind of where I use it as escape, but also that's where the lack of self-confidence came. And I love my parents to death, but a lot of shit I kind of had to figure out myself, um, which is fine. I think you ultimately it's good to do that and to have some sort of like self exploration, but it's just hard when you don't have like a shit ton of guidance, which is why I end up like I got I'm really close to so many friends, because I would use them as like almost like father figure type situations or mother figure type situations, because I just didn't really feel comfortable talking to my mom or stepdad about a lot of stuff, which I used to tell myself would be the case if my dad was still alive. Um, and so I just kind of like internalized a lot of things. And that didn't allow me to feel like I was able to be open and honest with how I was feeling with a lot of situations. That just kind of just like would internalize it, and that would lead to like, maybe temper tantrums, or like getting, just getting really angry about certain things, or experiencing a lot of panic attacks as a kid, and all the way until I was like in my late 20s. Um, so there was just that that effect of going back and forth, even though I did have a stable home here in the Bay Area, and I had a lot of friends, and I would say I was born and raised, or I would say I was raised in the Bay Area. There still was just a lot of finding out I had to do on my own as a kid, and into my like adolescence, into my young adult years.
Would uh thanks for sharing that, man.
Of course.
The we were actually having a conversation. I was having a conversation with somebody about loss of people close. Um, I'm curious, how does it still show up for you? Like missing your dad or thinking about him? Like, how does that? Uh, Somebody had suggested that it kind of never goes away with people that are real close.
Yeah, I used to think a lot about like the what ifs, right? Um, like if he was here, I would have said like fuck you to that bully, or fuck you to the teasing. That shit doesn't matter, right? I used to tell myself that, which is not necessarily the case whatsoever. Like I could have equally been like in situations where I didn't want to be open like with him if he was still around. Um, I think there's one key difference that I like. Yes, I miss the hell out of him, and I would give anything to be able to like hear his laugh and talk to him and ask for advice, right? Like I'm just happy of the time like I got with him, and I'm fortunate. There's a lot of people out there who don't even get to meet their parents, and they're still alive, right? There's a lot of people out there who just never had the opportunity to build a relationship with a parent for whatever reason. I think I miss the idea of having someone like that and being around. I think it's hard. Like, so he has two older brothers. Who also have sons that are the oldest of I'm the oldest of three, and one of them is the oldest. Well, they both have sons, and I see their relationship with each other, and I'm like, that's exactly what our relationship would be like. Like I just know it. Like I just know it would be. The brothers all look alike in some way, and I'm like, that's the hard part. Like seeing them communicate with each other and seeing like their relationship, and like, fuck, that's what I got to miss out on, the relationship side of things. But uh, yeah, it's all a learning process, and I used to getting like anxiety attacks, and yeah, I mean, I used to suffer from anxiety attacks because I used to be like, deathly afraid of like dying, like
Hmm.
really fucking scared of it. And I remember my first ever panic attack, and it was the weirdest experience I ever had. And I suffered them and didn't really deal with them, right? I just let them happen, dealt with it, mentally got over it, and moved on. And it wasn't until I discovered meditating, and when I was like 28, 29, when they stopped. And I think I haven't really experienced one since. And I'm
You
33 now.
answered the question I was going to ask.
Yeah.
What because you said when your brother was born, things started, and I don't know if that was it or if it was just very much you both were processing the loss of your father, and it just the environment wasn't right for you to do that because you said your mom was going through some stuff too.
Well, I think like I don't know if I intended it that way, but so my dad being the youngest and him passing away unexpectedly from something that was not hereditary and a kind of a fluke accident, if I'm being honest with you, which I've recently just learned, which is a whole nother crazy story, um, is that my mom just like wanted to get us in a safe spot, and she wasn't comfortable just being in Detroit for a lot of different reasons, and um, so she moved back here. And then when my brother was born, like we had this like weird, like kind of blended family, right? And my stepdad got in the picture. So the thing that's a little crazy here, my dad, my stepdad, and my mom were all friends. They're all friends. When my parents were in the Bay Area together, they all used to work together at a place called Service Merchandise, which is like a Circuit City. If anyone out there remembers what they are. I think they may have been a Bay Area chain. Anyways, they used to work there, and they were all homies. They used to hang out. They used to party the whole thing. And so I used to know my stepdad as Uncle Jimmy. And I remember him coming out to Michigan and being at my dad's funeral and being supportive and talking to him on the phone, as a kid, when I lived in Michigan. And then then they hit it off and like had my brother. And I don't think things changed. It was just like, okay, we're starting like a new family. And like we'd go through like internal crises, like, do we change our last name? Right. I remember having that discussion with my mom. And she goes, ultimately it's your guys' decision if you want to do that. But just remember, like, this is your dad's name. There was like weird conversations we would have like that. And my sister and my stepdad never really had that like bond. Like I had sports. And so I was able to like bond with him about like sports and playing sports and, watching it and the whole thing. And that's why it was so like integral to my childhood. But my sister never really had that thing. And that's where I wish that I worked more to have that connection, right? And she's living a great life in Colorado, and she's done very well for herself and finding what happiness is for her. I just wish I was there to help her discover that sooner, right? And be like kind of that protector. I remember one of my uncles after I think it's my uncle, my grandpa, I forget. Like after my uh, dad had passed away at the funeral, and we were about to move away, and I remember like one of them pulling me aside. I wish I knew. I can't really. I just remember a figure, and then being like, "All right, you're the man of the house now. Like you got to take care of your mom. You got to take care of your sister." And I was so damn young. I was like 7 or 8 at the time. I was like, "This is so heavy." Even at the time, I was like, "This is so heavy." Um, and I feel like I never really did that for Roma, right? And that's the part like eats at me a little bit.
Well, the interesting thing with that, I think, like now with context and especially having kids, and like I can be a very literal person. Children are extremely like they don't have context. Like saying something like that like is interesting because like my question is like, were there instructions with that? Like, what does that mean? Were they
Mhm.
did anybody tell you what that means to be the man of the
Mhm.
house and how to take care of? That's
No,
just
no,
like,
not no.
hey, here's a load of shit you need to do, but deuces.
Yeah, there was definitely no instruction. My dad and my dad's family in Michigan, they're all, they're Italian Americans, and my grandpa was a badass in his own right and didn't deal with bullshit from anybody and came from nothing, like in the streets of Detroit, and essentially like made a living, raised a really great family. And I love hearing stories about like the shit that he would do and the shit that was really fucked up that he would do. But he had to deal with a lot of adversity, and like how it is, like when you're men of that generation, they're like, you just suck it up, you don't have emotions, you don't what you're going to do is you're going to you're the man, you got to take care, you got to provide, that whole thing, which nowadays obviously for much better, the world is much better when everyone can support those endeavors if they want. Um, so I did never got an instruction. It was just like that's how it raised, and my uncles were like that. Even my mom's side, the same thing. It's the men are supposed to provide. The men are supposed to be the ones who are going to take care of the wife and the kids and the dog, and take on all the responsibilities and be the breadwinner, and all that good stuff. Um, so I think that's where they were coming from. But yeah, no instruction whatsoever. It was just like build the plane as you fly. Just a little 7-year-old DJ.
It's like entrepreneurship.
Yeah. Maybe that's why I'm so eager to
There's
do
the
it.
segue. There it is.
Well, I want to take you off the therapy couch. Sorry.
No, it's all good. I can go down. Like, I'm very open, man. I'm very open.
Yeah,
so.
over index on some heavy life experiences, because the story behind it is still very resonant. And I am now coming to a place of feeling that belief, right? How did you ultimately get to that point? Like, and really bring yourself into that space to say, it's time, and here I am. And now, after all of that, like, you kind of made it happen.
Yeah. So at first it's just kind of like, it's finding something that I believed in, right? Like it goes back into like being disingenuous. Like I didn't want it. There's a ton of companies out there and a lot of successful companies where people create something because there is a gap in the market of whatever industry that they're doing, right? And so like they find it and they become passionate about it because they see an opportunity to make a shitload of money and exit, like by being acquired, IPO, whatever it may be. Nothing wrong with that. I knew, and I was self-aware to the point like I want to do something that I gave a shit about, right? So that was the first step. And podcasting just kind of came into my life just serendipitously, I guess. Like just got introduced to it like pretty early on, 2015, 2014. I used to work in radio, and I love this idea of like no commercial radio. And so when I found it, it was like, okay, this is a cool thing. I like doing it. I like being on air. I like interviewing people. I like talking about something that I care about. So that was the first thing, just like finding that. And then it was like, okay, that's step one. You have something you give a shit about, and this is a hobby. And then recognizing, okay, well, now there is a gap in the market for this hobby. Like, is there an opportunity for me to do what I give a shit about to make money doing it? Right. And then the final step was just like, okay, formulating a plan to actually make it your full-time gig, and that people would want to take a chance on the business that you're ultimately creating, or that we were ultimately creating.
Keith started bringing up earlier leadership. Like this is like, it was one of the fastest answers that you gave. And then you were like, yeah, there's other stuff. But you kind of qualified like leadership, you're a new entrepreneur, knowing that people leave, not so much companies, but they leave leaders. They follow leaders. I mean, leadership is a value of mine. It's a core value. So I'm kind of a leadership nerd. I don't know if I'm good at it, but I want to be. But like, what does leadership mean to you, or where are you at in your journey and understanding leadership? Maybe that's the question. That's
still very early, right? Like I'm not going to pretend like I know everything, because I don't. And I want to. It comes from a trusting a gut situation too. Like I want to be a motivator, but I also want to provide people an opportunity to do and work for interesting creative, like creative roles, right? And I want to support that. I think often we imagine, and when you're in a leadership role, when you imagine that people are going to be as motivated as you as what it is that you're working on, which is not the case at all. Like you need to really understand and ask why, like bringing it back. Like why do they like working for you? Like, are you going to be an accelerant to their career? What can you do to provide them motivation in what they're doing in their day-to-day life, or just working on a project? And I think leadership is being open and wholehearted with those conversations, not making any assumptions of like, because I give a shit about this, you need to give a shit about this. No, like you are never going to get the best out of somebody unless they are really motivated and jazzed to be working on a project. And so you just got to have those conversations sometime, right?
the
And like,
whole you should work like an owner is
oh my God.
bullshit.
Yeah, it's
Like,
total bullshit.
pay me like an owner.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Like, what? This isn't I didn't come up with this.
And you know what? That's honestly, and you guys can, for video here, you guys can see like how this bothers me. Working for startups, like this whole idea of drinking the Kool-Aid, like
Yeah.
it fucking drives me nuts. It drives me nuts because you get paid like shit. They tell you that if you don't work hard, then you're going to affect the business, and the business must succeed, and you won't make a ton of money, especially here in Silicon Valley. and the shares that you are granted that mean fucking nothing when you're there, unless you go public, like literally nothing. They tell you like, oh, this is going, you're going to help us achieve there. It's like, no, like that's why like I have no problem when people jump from job to job to job to find out where they're going to go, or make money that way, because at the end of the day, that company will cut you so fucking fast. And that's why, like, I really have these conversations. I've had a ton of conversations with some friends who aren't fulfilled with their job. They're not making money. It's like, man, you got to do what you got to do. If it's not at that company, start your own thing, start a side hustle, find passion.
How do you, so just on that, when you think about leadership, knowing where you came from, and I think about this a lot, I know that they're certainly not going to care as much as I do, right? Your people at 2 or 3 in the morning when something comes up aren't going to be like, yes, let's fix a problem, right? Yet you need to balance 2 things. One, the need to do the job. And in my opinion, 2, the space for them to find what fulfills them, whether it's with you or not. Like, how have you started on your journey managing that balance? And do you agree with the what I just said, or do you have a different approach?
No, I do agree. I do agree with it, because that is the challenge of being a leader, right? If you want to build a successful company that is not going to be like, a lifestyle brand or something that's just going to, get you by, year over year, month over month, what have you, you have to get buy-in from the team that you are ultimately building, the people you're working with, and the customers that you support, or the products that you support, whatever it may be, right? And that's the challenge. Like, that's where, like, oh, drinking the Kool-Aid, the whole thing, like, good leaders not only provide like motivation, but they provide realness into insight of what the business is doing, how they're performing, and where like you ultimately, where teams or individuals need to, um either improve or be motivated, right? I wouldn't even say improve, which is like, how can we get you motivated? If you're not doing well in this, what do you care about, right? Like, what is it that you're going to do? And it's in finding a role or finding something that's going to get them motivated. Um,
And I
or just
think
like,
on
yeah.
that, like, I think about having conversations with my dad, because he was a supervisor at the FAA for a long time, and I remember being pissed off in my first job after college of just like the leadership, that's not even the word. I can't use that word. The people that were my bosses, and he was like, "Yeah, well, you lead people and you manage numbers, so like you're being managed. That's why you're not happy." And I remember growing up, uh, I remember when he would work extra shifts, he would work holidays, which kind of annoyed me because I'm like, I'm losing time. But like, he knew like this guy, he doesn't get, like, maybe him and his wife are divorced and he doesn't get to see his son except for the holidays. So he's like, hey, I'll take your shift, and he would work it for him, or he would do things like that just to be like, well, what's valuable to you? Because I'm gonna need the best that I can get from you when you're here directing these planes. Lives are at stake, so I'm gonna give you a little bit of extra, from this end. And I think I mean, Keith, you and I talk about this. We talked about it this week, actually. This idea of, for us, it's even all the way to the other end of the scale. Like, I want you to go find what you want to do, and I want you to find it, and like I want to help you get there, and I don't want you to work for me forever. I think we've got this like scarce, like, if I help them, if I work them out of a job, or if I help them promote themselves or go do their thing, then I'm going to be SOL. And it's like, well, it's not about you. It's kind of
And I
the
think
take.
to add to that too, because TJ, you said it, and especially with big companies, it's easy to say, like, they'll cut you like that. So find what you want to do. When you're an entrepreneur, it's like, I can cut you like that, right? Like, if you're not doing what you need to be doing, we're gonna have to move on. And while you're here, I want to do everything I can to help you figure out whatever that is. And in that, you may love it and up your performance and be here, or at least you'll up your performance while you're here. And then next thing you know it, we're all happier because that we're honest about it, right? Like, we get this, there's such a dishonest relationship between employees and companies. You know, the company wants you to bring their best, and the employee wants to feel like this is, I mean, they spend 40 hours a week here at least, right? And like, I want to feel like I belong here. And yet at the end of the day, we have big layoffs, riffs, and, you know, up, see you later. Now I feel betrayed. And yeah, and there's just nothing. But if we can be honest about it, like, bring your best. If you don't bring your best, I can let you go. But at least while you're here, let's find out like what revs you up, what drives you. Like, are you in the wrong job? Should you be doing something different? Should we be trying something different? Like, what's going on? And it just ends up in a better place. Like, I'm not giving you a pension, but at least that can be a form of a modern day pension. I don't know.
I think it's always a challenge, right? I think there's always like when you get that in any relationship, once you get to resentment, it's hard to recover from that, all right? And I think there's a lot of
100%.
times like,
Yeah.
you know, if you're in a manager or in a leader's position and you start to resent, people that or individuals or workers that aren't giving your best, or if you're on the employee side of things and you resent a company because, or your leaders because they're not giving you a raise or they're not giving you insight. Like once you do that, it's just like, it's a tough spot to be in. And as you grow a company, like how do you build individual relationships to understand, you know, um, what drives somebody? And it's tough, right? And that's why you got to like it starts from the top, and you got to be wholehearted about it, and then it's got to emanate down, right? And that's it's kind of what when Julie and I started it, like we're like we are going to no bullshittery whatsoever. Like we need that's number one
Is
goal,
that on the
right?
wall? Is that the motto? No
No
We
bullshittery.
should actually.
bullshittery.
We
You need a
should. We
sign.
should.
You need to print it
Yeah, we
up.
You
should do
need a
that. Yeah.
sign. Yeah.
I should, man. We should get her on the pod.
What do y'all think about it's like the themes I'm hearing here are like misalignment, and I like if I kind of want to get existential for a second.
That's where
It
we
seems
live,
like
homie.
humans are like, is any human meant to work behind a screen and sell shit that they can't tangibly touch and they don't even know what the fuck it really does? Like, is like, are we? I think there's like a
No.
super
The answer is no.
basic.
Yeah, I can. That I firmly believe that. No.
Well, I mean, add to that, like humans, mammals, we are not meant to have shared currency. Like we were not evolutionarily speaking, we way more time without shared currency. And what shared currency does to the psychology and human experience, mammalian experience, tests have been done on monkeys. Like it's caustic. And as a result, we are adapting, but we end up getting stuck in all of these things that we have no alignment for or are not meant to do because of money.
So then that would go to the second thing that I was picking up which was I think Keith, did you say trust, dishonesty, like not being able to be honest about both of you said it, being honest about the conversations at work and like should I be here, like that. It's like at the most basic core level we're dishonest about it. So we're starting at just with a couple points down, and I think maybe people have different tolerance levels for that misalignment. Like the VP, the CVP at Salesforce has a higher tolerance for that misalignment than you, TJ.
Yeah, I think I know where you're getting
And
at here.
maybe they do,
Yeah.
maybe I don't know.
I don't know. It's just like it's hard, right? Like I mean, at the end of the day, and it goes back to what Keith is saying. Like everything comes back to like it's just all driven by currency, right? Like I mean, at the you could work your ass off, but at the end of the day, if you're not providing that revenue or whatever you're doing, like when you work at those big companies, there's so much pressure to drive that number, especially if you're in sales, man. I like Yes, exactly. So it's like, I'm happy to be in a situation where like I can hope people will be honest and when they start to work for us and what we're doing and like as we grow, like there is an opportunity where people can like have flexibility in their schedules and do things that they want to do.
Um, a thought here on the entrepreneur side, like we were having a conversation earlier this week about like not getting caught back in that trap of like I'm used to big company sales, and so like kind of trading one golden cell for another. Like, oh, I've left this and now I'm over here, and it's like, yo, where's my numbers, B? Like, I need you to get your sales up. Like, because at the end of the day, Keith, you nailed it. Currency, like, it's right back to like, is currency the win? Is currency the success metric? It's the one I've been taught is the most important, but is it? I mean, I don't think it is, but I don't know. Like,
If you're in
and how have
sales,
you
it is.
balanced that,
If you're in
TJ?
sales,
Like,
it
how
is.
have you not gone right back to what you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's a great question. And I think it's still like a learning process, right? Like I think so. Yes, in order for us to continue, just like any small business, right, or any growing business, you need to have the revenue to get to a spot where you can support yourself and those who are, work. Yeah, right. It matters, but what also matters is building something that people can appreciate. Like for example, Julian and I, before we came on as 50/50 partners, we were like, we want to build, obviously we want to create something that will provide us generational wealth, but that's not like that implies, currency, but it's more of like, how can we how can we allow our business to deal with all the things that current Silicon Valley companies deal with, like diversity with our workforce and making sure that we are hiring people that come from many different backgrounds. And then, we want to be known as that company that is helping those who normally wouldn't be in the audio space be able to get in the audio space. Like that was very, very clear from day one. And that was a non-negotiable for both of us. And to me, that is a type of currency, if you will, right? Like that is a way, like we are people who want to come work for StudioPod or are interested in working with us, whether they're a client or an individual. We want them to know that we are different in that way.
Well, listen, this has been, and I have been listening on mute as we have a fourth interviewer.
Nice.
Well done, TJ. That was classy, man. That was classy.
Fair. You know what? Let's all do it.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us and diving deep and going wide. Like this is a really fun conversation.
And I gotta say that big thank you. Like I'm glad you came on. I did listen to one of your episodes last night. It was actually one on knowing your audience as a podcast, and that's something that we're exploring. And I'm like, I really appreciate how y'all delivered it. Like, and I was like first taken aback. I was like, oh, this is professional, TJ and Julian. I like it. Like, but like it was super succinct and like packed full of goodness. So like if you're thinking about starting a podcast, I highly recommend going to listen to what was getting out there.
They have a lot of episodes on how. So
yeah. What does compassion mean to you?
What does compassion mean to me? Compassion is being completely honest with yourself first, so you can be honest with somebody else, is how I look at it. I don't believe that you can be compassionate towards somebody when there's no compassion within what you're doing, right? So be compassionate to yourself first, and then that will emanate to anybody that you're working with from a relationship standpoint, personal, professional, or other. I think there's often two times we get empathy and compassion mixed up. And you can be empathetic towards somebody else, but how do you be empathetic towards yourself? So I think if you can be compassionate towards yourself, and this is coming from somebody who has an inner critic, like if you be compassionate towards yourself, then you allow yourself to be open to others and other situations.